Slaka, for that very nice introduction. Thank you for recognizing all of the colleagues who came with me from Bratislava. It's just proof that ambassadors should never travel alone. We need lots of company wherever we go to stay out of trouble. So I'm happy that we have such a strong team here from our embassy joining me today. I'm especially happy to be back here at Shafarik University. As Professor Tomaszykova pointed out, I have been here several times in my 2 years, and it's not just me, it's our embassy, which has a very special relationship with the Department of British and American Studies, an institution that we believe has contributed so much to reinforcing shared experiences between Slovakia and the United States. As she pointed out in the introduction, I had the honor to recognize the department last month with our special Woodrow Wilson Award, and because of that I can think of no better place to conclude our embassy's year-long celebration of Czechoslovakia's centennial and the 25th anniversary of the Slovak Republic and our shared courage to be free. The story of Slovak-American friendship and the story of our shared courage to be free began over 100 years ago when successive waves of Slovak and Czech immigrants left home to seek a more secure, prosperous future in the United States. That so many of those Slovaks, or of the Slovaks among these immigrants, came from Eastern Slovakia adds to the resonance of telling this story here in Košice. Like generations of immigrants to the United States from all over the world, Slovak immigrants did not look to sever their ties with their homeland, loved ones, or friends back here in Europe, even as they embraced American values and traditions, which is the same thing as becoming American. They quickly adopted the proud American custom of civic activism and community engagement. They might not have used those words, and they may not have realized at the beginning what they were doing, but they quickly established a network that spanned immigrant communities in the United States and crossed the Atlantic Ocean. It was a network of clubs, social organizations, churches, families, and friendships. We can easily understand why these organizations emerged. Ordinary Slovaks, young and old, sought to work together in a new, strange land to help each other, to find comfort in familiar customs and languages, and to keep their sense of self and homeland alive. At the same time, their experiences in their new home shaped their aspirations for their compatriots back home. Having come to appreciate the benefits and responsibilities of democratic self-government, they concluded that those back in Europe deserved the same freedoms. World War I gave Slovaks and Czechs in America their chance to advance the cause of self-determination for their countrymen in Europe, not least because their aspirations largely coincided with the vision of American President Woodrow Wilson. While the United States had long sought to remain neutral in European conflicts and stayed out of the First World War for nearly 3 years, Wilson saw US entry into the war as a chance to create a new international order. He sought to move away from a system in which military might and secret treaties between great powers governed world events. In his vision, all nations, regardless of size or strength, would be free to choose their own forms of government and destiny. In other words, they had the right to national self-determination. As part of that process, the great European empires, including Austria-Hungary, would be replaced with independent, democratically governed nations. Slovak and Czech Americans, buttressed by heroes like Stefanik and Masaryk, saw a chance to secure a democratic homeland for Slovaks and Czechs within Wilson's vision of the post-war order. They convinced Wilson to place independence for Slovaks and Czechs on his agenda for peace, the so-called 14 points. Working through community and civic organizations in the United States, they moved to begin building the democratic institutions that would govern the first Czechoslovak Republic, with founding documents patterned after the US Constitution. On May 31st, 1918, Slovak and Czech patriots gathered in Pittsburgh to sign Czechoslovakia's birth certificate, the Pittsburgh Agreement. The formal founding of Czechoslovakia just 5 months later marked not just the creation of a new state, but also the birth of democracy in Central Europe. Slovaks and Czechs proved more than capable of governing their own affairs over the next 2 decades. By almost any measure, average wages, technological development, and economic growth, the new republic quickly joined its Western neighbors among the most developed in the world. We can also say that the idea of a transatlantic community of values began in those decades, with networks of Slovak, Czech, and American friends building a foundation of cooperation based on shared values and experiences. This cooperation and the overall success of Czechoslovakia was interrupted, of course, in 1939, when predatory, non-democratic powers moved to crush freedom in Central Europe. In dismantling the first Czechoslovak Republic, Nazi Germany supported the emergence of a collaborationist state in most of Slovakia. When the Slovak national uprising arose to challenge the Tiso regime, the United States and its allies provided support at a cost that included American lives. Regrettably, this heroic reassertion of ties between Americans and Slovaks was interrupted again after the war, when the Iron Curtain artificially separated Slovaks and Czechs from their true home in the Western community of democracies. Over the 4 decades before the Iron Curtain crumbled, the United States did not lose its faith that Slovaks would one day return to the community of democratic values. The vacant but unabandoned US consulate property on Vyacheslavovo Námestie in Bratislava, now the embassy in which we work, stood as a prominent symbol of that faith. Slovaks and Czechs ultimately rejoined the Western community of democracies because they had the courage to seize the opportunity to take back their freedom. Famous dissidents, writers, artists, and philosophers all played their role. But ordinary people, like the thousands of Slovaks who gathered with candles in Bratislava in 1988, ordinary people like the thousands of Slovaks who gathered with candles in Bratislava in 1988 and 1989 found the courage as well to reclaim their birthright of democracy, freedom of conscience, and freedom of expression. Slovak patriots then saw their highest ambitions realized with the creation of the Slovak Republic in 1993. And just as we stood with you in 1918, the people of the United States stood with Slovaks in 1993 and continue to stand with you today as friends, partners, and allies. In those early years of the new Slovak Republic, the United States delivered over $180 million in development aid to support Slovakia's difficult transformation from a command economy to a market-based economy. For example, over 300 Peace Corps volunteers gave of their time, talents, and labor, teaching English, advising business owners, and protecting the environment. Successive waves of diplomats, soldiers, entrepreneurs, and volunteers labored quietly behind the scenes to expand our relationships in the political, economic, defense, and non-governmental sectors. Students, scholars, civic leaders, government officials, journalists, and others shared experiences through US government-sponsored exchange programs. And American firms helped make Slovakia a great place to do business. Today, they employ approximately 55,000 people across the country. Throughout 2018, we have celebrated this shared century of the courage to be free. At the embassy, we have traveled across Slovakia all year, talking to ordinary Slovaks about your remarkable story of success. The networks of friends and families that helped bring democracy to Central Europe in 1918 still exist, still thrive, and are continuing to expand. As I mentioned earlier, we can find a center of shared experiences right here at the Department of British and American Studies. We can find a center of shared prosperity close by at US Steel. And we can also point to the defense relationship between Slovakia and the United States, our cooperation as NATO allies, and directly between the Slovak Armed Forces and the Indiana National Guard allows all of these other networks to grow and prosper in a zone of shared security. But today, as a century ago, it is shared experiences between ordinary Slovak and American people that serve as the foundation for our remarkable friendship. I rediscovered this simple fact over and over again throughout the year. A few days ago, for example, I hosted a traditional American Thanksgiving dinner for a few dozen alumni of the Summer Work and Travel Program, which brings university students to the United States for summer jobs and travel across the country. I listened to many of their stories about the friends they made, the experiences they had, and I realized these young people will be writing the next chapter in our history of friendship. In September, I met with this year's group of Fulbright English teaching assistants, young, recent American university graduates who are currently helping Slovak high school students learn English. When they leave, they will take with them a lifetime of memories, a network of friends, and a lifelong love for Slovakia and its people. And they too will be writing the next chapter of our friendship. I imagine that many of you heard about and possibly visited us during our 2-week Courage to be Free caravan roadshow across Slovakia in August. We visited 26 towns and small cities, including in this region, Snina, Trebišov, Sabino, and Vrano na Toplo. Throughout the year, we saw again the enduring impact of our shared, throughout the tour, we saw again the enduring impact of our shared history. At our first stop in Brezovo pod Bradlom, we met local historians who are preserving the stories of downed US World War II pilots and the courageous Slovak citizens who rescued them. At our last stop in Stara Ljubovna, I joined a tribute to Jan Kubashek, a local hero and signer of the Pittsburgh Agreement. Everywhere in between, we heard stories of relatives in the United States, of memorable vacations in the United States, of productive years studying in American schools or working in American businesses, and memories of American Peace Corps volunteers who left deep impressions on the communities they served. I'll share just one anecdote to illustrate the old French phrase, the more things change, the more things stay the same. At the end of our tour in Stara Ljubovna, a young man with an instantly recognizable American accent came up to shake my hand. The son of Slovak-American parents, he was, like me, a New Yorker by birth. Several years ago, he joined the Merchant Marine and makes his living as a navigator on U.S. merchant ships. This career gave him several months of vacation a year, part of which he usually spends with relatives who live not far from Stara Ljubovna. On one of these trips, he met a young Slovak woman, whom I also met. They planned their future together, but were not yet sure whether that future would be in the United States or in Slovakia. Either way, they were confident about their future, and they were right to be. Regardless of which country they settle in, they will find the peace, security, and freedom that our two nations have so courageously built and defended. That story, and stories very similar, have played out countless times over the past century of shared friendships. I am confident in their future because I have no doubts about the enduring commitment of the Slovak people to our shared values. In 2018, Slovakia not only remembered its history, it applied its lessons. Whatever political views you might have, I think we can all be inspired by the courage and devotion to decency of the ordinary people who stood up in response to the murders of a young journalist and his fiancée. The Slovak people, yet again, have the courage to defend the basic rights and values that define our societies: free expression, transparency, and government by and for the people. As I travel across towns in all regions of Slovakia, I see a civil society clearly devoted to those values. What my embassy colleagues and I saw and continue to see across this country gives us optimism about the future of Slovakia and the future of the partnership between the United States and Slovakia. Our relationship is strong and growing stronger, not just in traditional areas like defense cooperation and heavy industrial investment, but also in areas such as entrepreneurship, innovation, and modernizing education. I have no doubt that the shared values, experiences, and courage that brought us together 100 years ago will sustain us as we tackle challenges, both old and new, into the next century and beyond.